Trauma Therapist Podcast, episode 488. All right, guys, welcome to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. My name is Guy McPherson. My mission is to raise awareness of trauma and to support new trauma therapists just starting out on their trauma-informed journey. I do that through this podcast and my membership community, Trauma Therapist 2.0. If you're a therapist of any kind, interested in learning about trauma, and you're looking for support and inspiration, I invite you to check out Trauma Therapist 2.0 by going to traumatherapist2.com. That's traumatherapist, the number 2.com. All right, let's get started. This episode is sponsored by Somatic Experiencing. Trauma may be a fact of life, but it doesn't have to be a life sentence. Somatic Experiencing is a psychobiological method of addressing clients' physical and emotional trauma conditions and helps to give voice to their experiences without a need for them to retell their story. SE focuses on regulation of the nervous system and offers the opportunity to engage, complete, and resolve the body's instinctual responses to traumatic experiences. For more information regarding Somatic Experiencing and the SE Professional Training Program, the Trauma Therapist Podcast listeners can visit traumahealing.org/TTP. That's traumahealing.org/TTP. All right, guys, welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. I am thrilled to have as my guest today, Peter Mayfield. Peter, welcome, man.
Thanks so much. I'm really thrilled.
All right. Awesome. So Peter is a founder and executive director of Gateway Mountain Center, a youth development organization innovating how youth learn, heal, and thrive. Peter's enjoyed a 4-year career guiding people into mountain experiences and being an entrepreneur in embodied peak experience. Peter has traversed a trajectory from world-class climber to chief guide of the Yosemite Mountaineering School to founder of CityRock, the first full-service climbing gym in the world. Today, Peter is passionate about changing the system of care for youth suffering from serious emotional disturbance and complex trauma. All right, man. What I really love about having you on here is what you do just kind of checks so many boxes about what I'm interested in, passionate about. And so it's an honor to have you on here, really. First, before we get going here, share with our listeners where you're from originally and also where you're calling from.
Okay. Well, it's such a pleasure and honor to be on here. I have learned so much from your podcast.
Appreciate that.
Over the years. So that I get my turn. Yes, I'm originally from Berkeley, California, and grew up there in the 70s and currently live in Soda Springs, which is above Truckee. It's like the high point, Donner Pass between the Bay Area and Lake Tahoe. I live at 7,100 feet in elevation. Oh, wow. But today I'm actually in a hotel room in Elko, Nevada, because I'm kind of a fire smoke refugee. I finally drove away. It's only 4.5 hours to the east. And I've been spending my mornings in the Ruby Mountains, climbing mountains, and this morning went mountain biking and doing a whole lot of hours of work in a hotel room too.
Awesome. Well, that's pretty wild because I was living in Bend, Oregon, and we have had all the smoke. Oh. So my family, we relocated to Idaho. I'm in a hotel room too, getting away from the smoke. So it's crazy. But yeah. So let's dive in here. So, before we started recording, you shared about, and we heard about this in the bio, the kind of system of care, you changing, kind of disrupting that, if you will. Let's talk about how you got into this, how you got to start wanting to do that.
Yes. So in a lot of ways, I feel like I've been doing this work for 40 years, but in different contexts. As a teenager, I was a certified rock climbing instructor. I was just in this amazing place. The Bay Area. And on my weekends, I would be facilitating these transformational experiences for people. And being a rock climbing guide, it can be really intense. I mean, you're seeing people on the some of the best moments of their lives are in this flow state. They're facing deep fears. They'll burst into tears in the middle of a climb. Sometimes stuff will come up. You'll be sitting on a ledge and it turns into like, wow, this is like back and deal with like physical education in high school. And I just thought, this is such a bizarre disconnect, like some coaches barking at me there's nothing, positive or wellness oriented here or somatically informed. It's just like this strange concept of fitness. Again, this was the 70s. This was before, there were yoga studios on every corner. So I was really tuned into that. And I was like, I'm onto something. This climbing experience changes people. So fast forward to, being an entrepreneur for many, many years, and then being up in Truckee, and we were invited to come in and do enrichment programming and adventurous enrichment programming for the alternative education system, and like the continuation high school and the community school in our community. And they were kind of the forgotten stepchilds in the district, and the principals were visionary and said, you just come in, no one will notice, take them rock climbing, take them backcountry snowboarding. And being there on a weekly basis with some of these kids, we also would just see what was happening with the system of care. They would, there'd be a 5150 incident. A kid would have serious suicidal ideation and multiple days in our emergency room and get shipped off in an ambulance for 4 hours to the Bay Area and just kind of medicated into submission for 5 days and then released. No disrespect. I mean, sometimes that is the needed intervention, but we just were seeing this, or a kid saying, I really want to see a therapist, and then being on Medi-Cal and waiting for 3 months to have that appointment. So it's a 1% tax on all incomes over $1 million in California, just devoted to mental health funding. And 9 years ago, they had a big emphasis on innovation, and they invited us to participate in that, even to be on a committee to help them figure out how to dole out the funds. And we did that, and we proposed the program that we have now, Whole Hearts, Minds, and Bodies, Nature-Based Therapeutic Mentoring. What we didn't anticipate is that our very first referrals would be some of the most challenging cases, kids who are profoundly suffering in our community. And I could tell about one young woman who was referred in one of our early cases. The school psychologist said, nothing is working. She's had, 5 suicide attempts, 11 5150 psychiatric hospitalizations. Right. Do you want to try? And we took that on, and I took it on, and I've started working with her, is the proper way to say it. And it was a profound, successful experience. And really, even just reflecting back on that one case, we came up with our method, which we call 4 Roots for Growing a Human. Mm-hmm. But I'd love to tell you a story from that work.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to hear it, and I love the way you kind of corrected yourself and said, I started working with her. I think that's very powerful. So go, tell us.
Yeah, so this is a really unlikely match in a lot of ways. You would, when you read our proposal, you would kind of envision, maybe boys diagnosed with ADHD getting sent to go rock climbing with us or something. So this young woman was very deconditioned, obese, a goth girl, super heavy makeup, big black boots, all sorts of diagnoses in her past. She'd been diagnosed as borderline personality disorder, frequent self-harm, cutter person. And I met her and like, well, you want to go for a walk? And she did. And we started off, but it was just kind of an interesting thing. And we would do a couple of outings, learned that she loved to draw. So we would do nature journaling. We'd sit by the creek and draw plants in a really detailed way, which is actually a mindfulness activity to draw the detail of a plant. And the second session, we were on this walk, and she realized, like, oh, I'm late for my appointment with the behaviorist. So this young woman is in wraparound. So she got a lot of services. And she's 15 years old. And I was like, well, let's keep walking. I think I can find a shortcut across the valley here. And we got there and I said, you might get your feet a little wet. We start walking and it gets deeper and deeper. And pretty soon we're thigh deep in the swamp. And she goes through all the things a teenage girl would go, I'm going to ruin my clothes. My mom's going to kill me. And, we kind of handled each of those points of resistance as they came up. You can wash the clothes. It's just water. And we really dropped into that zone, into the flow state. And we were like with the ducks, eye level. We were, just in it. And we got to the river and she's like, where's the bridge? And then she's like, wait a minute, I can't get any wetter. And she led the way across the river. And she got to her appointment on time. But I could tell it had touched her deeply. And then we started looking for more adventurous experiences to drop into that flow state. And it was interesting. I have a history in my career. I've guided, hedge fund managers up El Capitan or heart surgeons up ice climbs. And I would take this young woman, we'll call her Isabel, and we would walk on just sort of rough ground and, maybe scramble over a log. And I realized I am in a flow state with her. I am using all of my, former high-end mountain guiding skills to just support, be there for this young woman, just kind of walking on rough ground. And it's like climbing, but it's horizontal. And over time, she just built more confidence. I noticed her posture changing and how she held herself and how she would look people in the eye and how she, just engaged the world. And over time, that the trust grew, our sort of partnership grew. And I'll share one more thing, that after maybe a month, 6 weeks of this, we just were journaling one time and she really shared her own history, her own story, what had happened. And she had been in the room when she was 6 years old and an older sibling was sexually assaulted, was raped. And this little girl was in the room. And, we know that that's being a powerless witness to that is one of the most horrific traumas. And this young woman had the kind of dissociative stuff and all sorts of symptoms. But it was interesting. And I hadn't been very trained at that point, but my instinct was just, I was there with her. I was hearing that. I cried with her. And we didn't really go back there. We kept on our path of self-efficacy building through experiences together. And she did have other therapists at times. Maybe she unpacked those memories, but the more I'm learning and studying, the point isn't to really dig deep into those traumatic memories. It's to build new neural structures of positivity and efficacy and connection to move into a new place. And that is really what happened. And it finished up with her asking me if I could coach her toward getting a job. And I was like, well, a great way to do that is to volunteer for a great nonprofit. So our sessions became that. I would get her out of school early. We'd go over to Project Mana and she would help unpack the trucks and distribute food. And she was a native Spanish speaker. And in that, she went from being the problem kid, the kid with issues, the emo drama girl, to bringing home groceries every Tuesday night to her family and having extra groceries for her cousin's family. And that pathway was so powerful. Her psychiatrist called me and said, if you're going to keep doing this, I think we can take her off medication. And she had been on medication for 10 years.
Oh my God.
Well, not 10, 8 years, and she was on some of the antipsychotics associated with huge weight gain. And she got off medication, lost 80 pounds. She's a full-time employee at our local preschool.
Wow.
And yeah, so we have a lot of stories like that. And it just, we achieved that by building a system of care, a treatment method and a delivery system. Therapeutic mentoring. I would pick her up from school and I would spend all afternoon Sometimes I'd buy her dinner. Like, we would do these long afternoon sessions once a week. But I think some of the other hallmarks I point to, connecting to other people, being out in the world, even the getting the job part, it's kind of a hallmark of our method.
Well, yeah, I mean, thank you so much for sharing that story. I mean, it's beautiful. It feels magical, but it's not magic. I mean, and it's easy to kind of skip over what I'm about to talk about right now, which is what you did and didn't do and how you did what you did. I mean, that, the way what you shared you created a lot of space for her, created an environment that was real safe. You kind of guided her off that path into that muck and stuff. I mean, that's very skilled. Where did that come from you? I mean,
well, it really was the time. And even, I had this rock climbing gym in the Bay Area, and we immediately, got clients like John Muir Adolescent Drug Treatment Center, brought kids over once a week. And boy, the Alameda County Juvenile Detention Camp, with armed guards, would bring kids every other week. So I did have a lot of personal just experience, working with youth. There is a thing when we hire, we say that the first requirement is to have kid charisma. And it's hard to train that. Some people are better at that than others. And I do feel like I was kind of skilled in that way naturally. And I mean, even in high school, I volunteered at a school for differently abled children, as a freshman in high school, and for 4 years. So I definitely, it comes natural to me to have a authentic relationship with young people. That's just being present, being real, being respectful, listening. And then as we developed our method, I'm not formally educated, but I have a lot of CEs. I'm done halfway through the traumatic stress studies certificate course with Bessel van der Kolk. And, I'm all in with, some of my people are getting certified in NMT, and we go to all the conferences, we read all the books. So I find a lot of validation for this method that we have developed. 4 roots for growing a human. Root number 1 is authentic relationship. And all of our people get trained by a common guest for you is Sam Himmelstein. I know he's your friend. And that's how I found him, was listening to your podcast. Right, so we're a huge customer of his, right? All my people go through those trainings. And it's, yes, he perfectly bullet pointed what I already felt as authentic relationship. And it's a perfect frame. Nature, connecting to nature, is root number 2. There's a lot going on with that right now. It's almost funny. You can get an NIH grant to study that exercising outside is healthy. But it is. And there's some fascinating research about the impacts on the immune system. I mean, you can spend 3 days outside and have double the count of killer T cells, and and even a month later, you have 50% of an improvement. Then all the sensory integration. Root number 3 is embodied peak experience, and that's what I'm referring to. And these immersive flow states that you can get into, present moment. Maybe there's a little risk. You're not ruminating. You are dropped in. You're walking the log across the creek. It's easy with something like rock climbing, but I tell my people, find the horizontal rock climbing, find like the little boulder pile to balance over. And I think there's a lot to this. We've connected with some very top neuroscientists, Dr. Ruth Lanius up in Canada, and some of her team, spent some time with them, talking with them. And there's brain scans showing how, adults who had childhood trauma have weak connections in the default mode network that might be improved if you repetitively activate the vestibular seeds in the brainstem. That's what we do. So we're finding really current research that supports what we observed. And we really observed that having these kind of balanced challenges that are deeply supported with deep attunement from a therapeutic mentor, a clinically supervised, clinically trained therapeutic mentor. These are really effective. And then the fourth route is what I described with Isabel, is connecting to the community through service. And it's it'll be a book. When it's a book, come back on and talk about it. But 4 Roots for Growing a Human, it's a framework we really find that works well.
Let me go back to the authenticity. How do you define that?
Meeting the youth where they are at, and being, it's just that framework where we are not there to change them. We are there. Our relationship should be a container in which they grow their own self-awareness. And with growing self-awareness, growing self-efficacy, they start making choices they don't regret. And it takes some patience. It takes some your own, self-care, self-presence to do that. And it's easier to do that. We have the luxury of doing 3 to 4 hour sessions. I get it. It's a challenge. Most of your listeners are doing 50-minute sessions on the couch, or not necessarily on the couch, but 50-minute sessions. And it's a challenge to do that. Great therapists are able to do that in 50 minutes. We can take, well-trained paraprofessionals and spend more time and do that. And I guess the other piece is being less boundaried, like we are all in. We are able to show up at an IEP meeting or a probation meeting, or write a letter to a judge, or just engage the youth. I mean, it's getting a little off authentic relationship, but that alliance is strong, and they come to us. They see that we are there for them in a really, right. And these kids, I mean, we're working in wraparound. So these are kids with serious adverse childhood, traumatic backgrounds, serious complex trauma. We have kids who tested positive for methamphetamine at birth and did 4 foster placements. And now they're a little 9-year-old living with their aunt, trying to get through a day in 4th grade, and triggering, and people get hurt and police come. And I mean, our method is it's very intensive, and it's expensive. I mean, we're doing these long sessions, and we pay our people well. And, we jumped through all those hoops to get Medi-Cal certified. And it's not, I mean, every kid could use the therapeutic mentor, but we're reserving our service for these really, kids with serious emotional disturbance. And for those kids, it works, and it's an important thing to look at in the system of care, because when it doesn't work with these kids, the outcomes are devastating, and that's expensive,
right.
Commitment, all that, psychiatric hospitalizations, 6 months in jail is very expensive.
Listening to you talk, it's reminding me a lot of the experience I had when I was working at a clinic in Northern California. We were assessing and treating young kids who were showing early signs of psychosis. And we had these kids, 99.9% of them had been traumatized and were a lot like you described. And a lot of times, these kids would come to us after their 4th therapist and after multiple times in the hospital, and they had this attitude like, okay, what do you have that these other people didn't have? My guess is people have shown up to you like, okay, what do you got? What are you going to show me that's going to be different? And what you're describing is very interesting, and I want the therapists who are listening to this to hear it. And they might say, well, great, I don't have 3 hours, or I don't have that particular luxury, but they do have the luxury, and I would dare say responsibility, to show up the way you're talking about, which is being authentic. And the reason why I wanted to highlight that is because I think, in this field, there's a lot of talk about that, but not so much as how to get that or cultivate that or hone that. And it reminded me of a time, when I was a young therapist and just seeing clients, I was doing the antithesis of what you were doing. I was learning this stuff, and surely they needed to know page 22 of Bessel van der Kolk's book, and I was going to somehow jam that into the session, and it just obviously wasn't working. And I remember I was working with this young kid one time, and we were doing an assessment, and this assessment was, literally 37 pages of trying to find out whether they were experiencing early signs of psychosis. And I was reading from this thing, and it was ridiculous. And it got to a point, I saw this young kid, and they were just zoning out. And I took the pages of this assessment, Peter, and I just put it down, and I was like, this is ridiculous. Okay. And I just disrupted the whole pattern of what I was doing and what was happening in the room. And really, for the first time, I just quit the BS. And I was like, what is going on? What are the people out there not hearing? I connected in a way that you're talking about. And it was a real big moment, a big shift for me. And I just really appreciate you talking about this. And it's so undeniably powerful. And I wish people listening to this who are doing 15-minute sessions can adapt. So my question is, what do they need to hear? What do the people listening, what is the take home, do you feel, in what you're sharing?
I mean, one interesting frame, I think, is what we do is often shoulder to shoulder, not face to face, and meaning that we're having some shared experiences. And it is hard for me to offer. I mean, there is a lot of amazing for sure. And I think some of the research we're interested in could point to a slack line in the office, or yard on the side of the office with a line of boulders and kids could walk on, and maybe they can do that for 15 minutes, like outside the door of the office, shoulder to shoulder, then sit and process and talk and unpack some things. But that is, what we do is more shoulder to shoulder. And I think just, I borrowing from back to Sam Himmelstein, inherently non-clinical relational activities is such a perfect acronym. And finding that, having the spaciousness and the patience and taking the time to do that, I think is a great clinical method to just, I appreciate your story of taking the papers and tossing them in. You probably gained some alliance by that. You could have burned them in a bowl or something.
Right, definitely. Well, let's
not today, not with the party.
Yeah. As we kind of wind down here, you said you had a quote. I wanted to get to that before we do get ready to close out.
Thanks. So this is an Abraham Maslow quote, but during a peak experience, the individual experiences an expansion of self, a sense of unity and meaningfulness in life. The experience lingers in one's consciousness and gives a sense of purpose, integration, self-determination, and empathy. So we like that. And there is so much around peak experiences. And it's not just, spectacular outdoor nature stuff. It can be a peak experience to be in a really present moment conversation too. And we pick up kids when it's a blizzard out and we sit in a coffee shop and do artwork. We're not always out.
Right.
And really this method, we believe in it. It's also very efficient. We have one license. I mean, we hire licensed therapists who clinically supervise 5 people like me. And some are MFT interns, and it's a great internship that we offer. But some are, like ski coaches. They're great with kids. They did it for years. They're thinking about grad school. They do this work. And so so that one licensed therapist is clinically supervising like 80 hours of nature-based therapeutic mentoring in a week. It's it is a system that could go to scale. We could take this to the Bronx and do it. I mean, we could,
yeah.
Or in California, Bakersfield, like the wellness of our state, where there aren't a lot of cool programs. Because you can find interesting nature space anywhere, and you can find interesting, rough ground to activate the vestibular, the sensory motor, and the proprioceptive neural pathways. And so we're ambitious. We do want to take it to scale. We want to grow this. We want to write about it. We want to do research. We want to spread this method.
Awesome. As we close out here, how about a go-to book recommendation?
Yeah, so I love the books that so many people recommend, but I offer a couple that are probably less heard of. Nature-Based Therapy. It's a pretty new book by Nevin Harper. It's a practitioner's guide, and he talks about wilderness therapy. That's actually another piece. We are differentiated. We are not a residential wilderness therapy program. We think there's a lot of efficacy in that, but it's very different. And a lot of times it's kind of a banishment. The kid is sent away. We work with kids where they are. They're still at home, still in school, still in community. So I want to make sure that's clear. We are a nature-based program, not a wilderness therapy program. But his book does talk about both. The Nature Fix by Florence Williams is interesting. And just some of the research on the neuroscience of nature exposure. And then on a system change level, Radical Help, a pretty recent book by Hilary Cotton. And this is from England, but it's really going into the small scale relational aspects that can really help people on an empowered pathway to make change. And she's kind of going into like the welfare system in England and trying these experiments, and increasing human connection always makes it better. And so many of our systems of care decrease human connection. And that's a problem. And I think, we need to reimagine how we do, public behavioral health. And I hope to be a small agent of change there.
All right, man. Well, I'll have all those linked up at the show notes page at the traumatherapistpodcast.com. Peter Mayfield of Gateway Mountain Center will have that linked up. Peter, man, I love what you're doing. Loved having you on here, and definitely going to want to have you back when we're both at home and the smoke is settled. It was great talking to you, man. Thanks so much.
Thank you. I'd like to come see you in Bend sometime. I go up there and ski and climb pretty often.
Awesome. All right, brother. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Once again, thank you to Somatic Experiencing for sponsoring this podcast. Somatic Experiencing Trauma Institute is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to resolving trauma worldwide by providing professional training and education in somatic experiencing. It was founded by Dr. Peter Levine, author of the bestseller Waking the Tiger, who developed somatic experiencing based on explorations of how animals deal with threat, nervous system overwhelm, and traumatic experiences on a daily basis. Learn more about somatic experiencing and the SE Professional Training Program at traumahealing.org/TTP. That's traumahealing.org/TTP.